Just admitting everyone. Let me just check the transcription and make sure that the transcription is okay. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Letting everybody into the room, just giving everyone a chance to come in. Hi everyone, I'm Nolene Hammond-Jones. I'm the Deputy Head of LUM's Careers for Work-Related Learning. We're joined today by representatives from Latitude Law. So we've got Callum, one of the trainee solicitors at Latitude Law, and a senior caseworker, Javier, who will be doing today's session. So today's session will be recorded. And we will be taking questions at the end. So if you want to put questions in the Q&A, we will ask those questions at the end. So thank you. Over to you, Callum.
Perfect. Thanks, Nolene. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, myself and Javier today are going to have a discussion with you today about the most common routes for students who are looking at graduating soon, with a particular focus on the graduate visa and skilled worker visa. You'll see we've kind of set out a little slide there. I hope everyone can see it. That sort of breaks down the visa routes based on whether you completed your course and whether you haven't completed your course. Most relevant for the discussion today is going to be the skilled worker and graduate visa, because those are the most popular, and obviously, you being students intending to finish your courses, that's going to be most applicable to you. But we will brush over some of the other available options as well, just very briefly. So to get started, Javier is going to go through the graduate visa, and then I'll take the second half of the presentation and discuss the skilled worker visa. So yeah, over to you, Javier.
Yeah. So yeah, my name is Javier. I'm a senior caseworker at Latitude Law. Yeah, we're going to go through the graduate visa that I think is one of the most preferred options for you upon completion of your course. Essentially, the graduate visa is open to all international students who have completed an eligible course. This is, you have completed your degree level or above in the university. You can show evidence of that, and you are mostly eligible for the graduate route. All the successful applicants under the graduate visa can stay and work in the UK for 2 years, but you will see also that it's 3 years if you have completed a PhD or other doctoral qualification. The downside of the graduate visa is that it cannot be extended, and it doesn't qualify for the it will not qualify if you previously held permission under the doctorate extension scheme. So this means that when you complete the 2 years or the 3 years under the graduate route, you need to switch to other option. Maybe you're working and you can switch to a skilled worker visa. Maybe you have family, you have started your family here in the UK, you can also switch to those options, but you cannot get an extension on the graduate. The other highlight of the graduate visa is that this route does not lead to settlement, although the permission as a graduate can count towards a future 10-year long residence application. So what this means is that, for example, when you finish your graduate route, you switch to another permission, not always, you cannot count that the time you have spent on the graduate towards settlement. To count this time, you will need to meet some specific conditions. Yeah, to be successful on a graduate visa application, you will always need to meet the validity, suitability, and eligibility requirements. Then we will go a little bit about the validity requirements. So essentially, the first one is to use the correct application form, and the correct fees need to be paid for the application. This application has a home office fee of £822, and then you will also need to pay the immigration health surcharge that is of £1,035 a year. So if you're going for the 2-year option, you will pay £2,070, and if you go for the 3 years, you will pay £3,105. Then the dependents, if you have dependents, they will also need to pay the immigration house surcharge that is a little bit more, is a little bit cheaper, is 776 per year. Then the biometric information must be enrolled. This is really simple. For you guys that you have come on a student visa from outside the UK, it's a similar process that you did in your country, but here in the UK. The third party that is dealing with it nowadays is called TLS. So you go to an appointment with them, they take a picture, fingerprints, and everything is done. Sometimes you may be eligible to do what is called an IDV app, that is doing everything with the mobile phone, with a phone application. And this way you shouldn't need to go to an appointment, but it will really depend on whether or not you are able to use it or not. Then after that biometric information, you need to submit your supporting evidence. As part of the obligatory evidence is the proof of identity and nationality, your valid passport. Then you must show that you are in the UK and you must hold or have last been granted permission as a student. Then you need to show also some specific evidence, but just for those who have been awarded a scholarship or a sponsorship for fees in the past 12 months. And then after doing all this, you should be getting a decision between 3 to 8 weeks of the biometrics enrollment. There is no priority service, so you cannot get a decision quicker than that, but it's a pretty much fast outcome. Then the suitability requirements. This is common to most of the immigration routes and is more about your character and conduct in the UK and other countries. You must not be in the UK in breach of your immigration laws or be on immigration bail. So essentially, we strongly encourage to submit this application before the student visa expires, because if not, you wouldn't meet the suitability requirements. You also must not fall for refusal under what is called the general grounds of refusal. That is criminal records, using false documents or information, trying to deceive the Home Office in the past, even criminal convictions in other countries that can lead to issues on the suitability requirements. And also there is a general grounds for refusal. In the general grounds for refusal, you can also see that there is a provision of having outstanding NHS debt for at least £500. So although all the money you have outstanding with the NHS and everything, it needs to be paid before submitting the application. Then we will go with the eligibility requirements. So the graduate route is a point-based system. It is under the point-based system. So you need to score 70 points to be eligible for the graduate visa. And to score these 70 points, we can break it in 3 different points. The first of it is the successful completion of the course that you are currently studying. The second is that course, that studies, need to meet the qualification requirement, and then you must have studied in the UK for at least 12 months in those studies. Then going a little bit in detail about the successful course completion, the sponsor of the student visa, this is the university or the higher education provider, must have a track record of compliance. Lancaster University meets these requirements, so you shouldn't worry about that part. Then you must have successfully completed and studied the course during the last grant of permission to study. So this is, you need to be studied the same studies as per that permission. If permitted to change the course of study without a fresh application, you must have completed the course to which you changed. So again, this is the basis of your permission. And the university must notify UKVI that you have successfully completed your course. This is usually done automatically, but if not, you can also change the university when you are submitting your graduate visa application. Then we will go with the qualification requirement. So you must have successfully completed a course of study and have been or will be awarded so this is by the end of your studies. You need to be awarded either a bachelor's degree, a postgraduate degree, or another relevant qualification. You will see here a list of examples like a law conversion course, a legal practice course, bar practice course that are also relevant to this purpose. So you must have secured this qualification during the last grant of your student permission, unless this was to undertake a student union sabbatical officer. So this is those applications are quite complex because you must have completed in a student permission held before this student union sabbatical officer permission in this case. Then the requirement to study in the UK. So if the length of the course is of 12 months or less, you must have studied in the UK for the full duration of the course. You must have been in the UK studying for it. But if the length of the course is longer than 12 months, at least 12 months must have been completed in the UK. So this is, for example, for students that they do part of the course in another country, things like that. So they need to be careful in confirming that they have been at least 12 months in the UK studying. Then when the graduate application is successful, the conditions of this visa are the following. So what we already discussed, you will have permission to remain in the UK for either 2 years or 3 years, depending on the qualification you got. Then you can undertake employment, self-employment, and voluntary work. So you have the right to work here in the UK, but you cannot work as a professional sports person. That's one of the restrictions. Then the other restriction is that you wouldn't have access to public funds, and you can study, but not a course that is suitable for sponsorship as a student. Then what about your family members if you are going with the graduate visa option? So your partner and children will be able to apply, but you will need to show additional documents, essentially showing that you have a relationship with this person. So with partners, they will also need to meet the relationship requirements. The relationship needs to be genuine and subsistent. So you will need to show evidence of that. The applicant and the partner must intend to live together in the UK throughout the applicant's stay. And you also must not intend to stay in the UK beyond any permission granted to the partner. This is something that the dependent partner needs to show, that they must not intend to stay in the UK beyond the validity of the main applicant's permission. Then the children is similar. They need to be under 18 at the date of application. They must show that they are not leading an independent life, and that there are suitable arrangements for the care and accommodation in the UK, essentially that you have a place to accommodate them and financial means to provide for them. Sorry. Then what will be the benefits of using the graduate route? So as we were saying in the previous slide, you will get the permission to work at any skill level. So you can start working in the UK and start building your employment experience in the UK. And this will also provide you more freedom in the sense of you can essentially choose who do you work for. You will see in the skilled worker visa that part is a little bit different for the skilled workers. And then the other option is more of our experience dealing with other clients. Some employers prefer to employ graduates in the sense of kind of trying them out and then seeing if they are eligible for a sponsorship. Some other employers, obviously, they do they offer the sponsorship straight away, but others prefer to employ graduates first. Then the third benefit for the graduate route is that it allows you to switch to another immigration category, as we were discussing at the beginning. And this option you will be switching can lead to settlement. For example, you can switch to a skilled worker visa that leads to settlement. You can also switch to a family visa if you're eligible, and that will also lead to settlement. So those are the three main advantages of the graduate route. And the documents a graduate should provide. Well, I was more or less hinting about the documents you should provide, but here you can see a brief list of what you will be providing. You will need your valid passport, an e-visa, your certificate of accepted, the CAS letter, essentially the letter they gave you for your student visa application. Evidence of completing your qualification if held. If not, you can ask the university for it. If a scholarship or a sponsorship, a letter confirming they consent to the application. This is fundamental as well. And the documents about your family that we were discussing before. So when the relationships, so when that you can accommodate them or they can be accommodated here in the case of children. And yeah, here we have a brief Q&A about the graduate route. So, for example, one of the most common questions we have, can a student submit a graduate application before receiving the final results? So the student sponsor, in this case, the university, must notify UKVI by the date of application that the student has completed the course. If UKVI don't receive the notification, UKVI will contact the sponsor instead. They will contact the university and confirm whether or not the student have completed the qualification. This, what essentially will mean is, depending on when you submit the application, you may have a delay on the decision making process if UKVI has to go back to a university and confirm whether or not you have completed this. This is where we advise on providing some kind of evidence that you have completed your course for them to be on, and also letting the university know that they should be notifying UKVI by the time you want to submit the application. Then can a student submit before all course fees have been paid? So paying the course fees is something that is linked to the completion of the course. So the completion of the course is not all about modules, it's all about as well the settlement of the fees. So yeah, you should be looking for settle the fees before before submitting the application as a graduate. Then it says, what if the name of the course has changed? If changed by the student sponsor, by the university, but the course content is the same, this will be acceptable. There shouldn't be any further issues about it. Then the fourth and last question we have here is, can I travel outside the UK after I have completed my course, but before I submit my application for a graduate visa? So you should be able to travel outside the UK during such period, but when you should be in the UK when you submit the graduate visa application. So if the course completion date is way earlier than the date you have on your certificate of acceptance of studies, there is a risk that the Home Office may curtail your leave. So you need to be really careful about it. So if you have completed your course, but you are not yet ready to submit your graduate visa application, you need to be in the UK by the time you submit your graduate visa. And also you need to pay attention of the date of your completion date and the date you have on your CAS letter for the Home Office not to give you issues about it. And yeah, now we have finished with the graduate visa part. So now is the turn of my colleague Callum that will discuss with you the skilled worker route.
Perfect. Thanks, Javier. So I think certainly following on from the graduate visa, the skilled worker visa is what a lot of people might consider as the optimal route to get on early, specifically because it is a route that leads to settlement. I mean, Javier addressed this already, but the graduate route doesn't lead to settlement, although there are some distinct advantages to getting onto the graduate route as well, in that you can get some experience in the UK labour market, but I think specifically relevant for in terms of the skilled worker route is that it can lead to settlement. So if you are looking to attain settlement in the UK, getting onto the skilled worker visa is very advantageous. The first thing to note about it is this is a sponsored role. So similarly to how you are in the UK as a student, being in the UK on the basis of being a skilled worker is based on the sponsorship of an employer in the UK that holds a sponsor license. Similarly to the graduate visa, the requirements are split into validity, suitability, and eligibility requirements. Now, the validity requirements, I won't sort of go into major detail here because they are very similar to the graduate visa in that they're mostly procedural, submitting the correct form, paying the correct fees, the immigration health charges, etc. But there are some specific requirements related to applying from within the UK as a student. And there's some specific conditions that you would need to meet if you're looking to switch from a student in the UK to a skilled worker visa. Condition A is essentially that you have completed the course of study for which your confirmation of acceptance of studies was assigned. So when you look at your confirmation of acceptance for studies, it will have the start date and completion date. So essentially making sure that you apply after that completion date, you should meet condition A. Condition B applies for allowing you to apply before the completion date, but essentially you'd need to have the certificate of sponsorship, which is the certificate issued by the sponsoring employer. You'd need to have that issuing a start date that is no earlier than the course completion date on the CAS. So essentially it means you can't actually start working until after that completion date. Condition C is similar in that it applies specifically to PhD students. Essentially, the certificate of sponsorship must have a start date that's no earlier than 24 months after the start date of the course. So it's slightly different there, looking at the start date rather than completion date, and it has to be no earlier than 24 months after that start date. I won't go into the suitability requirements again because Javier did mention them before, but again, they are related to character and conduct, essentially looking at whether there's any issues that might cause your application to be refused. But as mentioned, Javier has gone through that already. The eligibility requirements, similar to the graduate visa, they make up a majority of the requirements that you would need to meet to move on to the skilled worker visa. And again, this is a points-based system, so to attain a skilled worker visa, you would have to get 70 points, and these are separated into two distinct categories: the mandatory points and the tradable points. The mandatory points. There's three sort of mandatory points that you need to meet. Firstly, the sponsorship. That is, as I mentioned, attaining a certificate of sponsorship or a COS from an employer in the UK that is able to sponsor you. Now, what that means really is that they hold a sponsor license. So that's quite important to note, is that not all employers in the UK are able to sponsor people to undertake work as a skilled worker. So that's certainly something I would say to take away, is that if you are looking for employment, things like that, not all employers can do so. So it might be a point of conversation for you to have. There is also a registry of sponsored employers, and I think in a later one of these slides there is a link to the gov.uk website where there is that register. There also needs to be a genuine offer of employment, but that again really falls down to the employer, proving that to the Home Office as to why they are assigning a certificate of sponsorship for you. The certificate of sponsorship itself really applies as proof for you that there is a genuine offer of employment, because the employer has had to essentially assign that and grant that to you. So yeah, that's the first 20 points in relation to sponsorship. The second lot of 20 points are showing that there is job and appropriate skill level. So similarly to the sponsorship, where not all UK employers are able to sponsor people, not all jobs in the UK can be sponsored under the skilled worker visa. So the relevant points to note here are that the jobs that can be sponsored, or the occupations that can be sponsored, can be found under Appendix Skilled Occupation or the Immigration Salary List. Now, if any of you have gone onto the Appendix Skilled Occupation page before, you will note that there are a number of different job occupations listed. There's quite a lot there, and they all come with their own separate code as well. Essentially, it's a job of trying to find that your particular role that you're being potentially employed by the sponsoring employer fits into the code that is relevant under Appendix Skilled Occupations, and again also under the immigration salary list. So it does take a little bit of looking around. It gets slightly confusing as well, where some may also overlap in terms of the duties and things like that that are relevant to that particular job occupation code. But that's kind of the starting point, is looking at whether a job role falls under Appendix Skilled Occupations or the immigration salary list. There is an additional requirement for certain job codes that they would need to have an ATAS certificate. Essentially, this is being certified by the government that you can work in certain roles, and these generally apply to scientific or engineering roles, things that might require some sort of clearance. The final mandatory set of mandatory points come from English language proficiency, essentially showing that you have a level of English language that can, to meet that level. There's a few ways that it can be met, but the two most popular ways are by having a degree from a UK university of bachelor's level or higher. That's going to be most applicable to the majority of you, having sort of looking at completing courses in the UK and Lancaster University, and that can be used simply to meet the English language requirement. But another common alternative is the English language test, secure English language test, which can be sat. You would need to pass a secure English language test to the CEFR level B1, and that's in all 4 components: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. Okay, so over to tradable points then. These are the final 20 points that you would need in relation to the oh, sorry, I'm just getting everything. I just double check in Nolan. Can everyone hear me? I've just got a message saying that someone was struggling to hear me.
The audio is working fine. It might be an internet connection, so do leave the meeting and rejoin, and then that might help. If not, the session has been recorded.
Okay. Thanks, Nolene. Thanks. Okay, sorry. Just back to that. With regards to tradable points, then. So these relate to the salary requirement. Now, you may have heard quite a lot about this over the last year. It's quite significant with regards to salary in 2024, because there have been some quite significant increases to the relevant salary requirements for the skilled worker visa. Now, there's a number of different options for meeting for getting tradable points under salary. And they kind of they base themselves on the different circumstances of the applicant. Okay, so the general sort of level of salary under option A, there's a £38,700 base salary, or you would need to have a look at Appendix Skilled Occupations for, again, looking at that occupation code, and there will be for each occupation code a going rate. And what you need to look at is whether the going rate is higher than the base rate of £38,700, and if it is, that's what you would need to be paid for that occupation code to get those tradable points. Okay, so that is the kind of like the option A, which is the more general of options, but there are different options available which allow, based on the different circumstances of the applicant, which allow for certain concessions on the salary. So option B is for those holding a PhD relevant to their job that they are applying under. They can rely on a base salary rate of 34,830 or 90% of the going rate for that code, whichever is higher. So again, it's going back to the occupation code. If you have a look at the occupation code, you will see the going rate, and you will also see a 90% going rate as well. And again, you'll see 80% and 70% depending on different options. Oh, sorry. Option C, these again apply to PhD students, but specifically those in a STEM subject. The base rate for that is £30,960 or 80% of the going rate for that code, again, whichever is higher. Option D is slightly different. This goes back to a different list to appendix skilled occupation, looks at the immigration salary list. You may have previously heard of it being called the shortage occupation list, but again, that was changed earlier this year. This allows for a base salary rate of £30,960. Or the going rate for that code, but there isn't a discount. There isn't a percentage discount related to the immigration salary list. So you would simply look at it and look at the going rate and just double check whether it's higher than £30,960. Now, the one that might apply to a lot of you, or that you might have heard of already, is option E, which is the new entrant salary rate. This essentially allows for a salary of a base rate of 30,960 or 70% of the going rate for that code, again, whichever is higher. Now, this applies to people who can be considered a new entrant to the UK labour market, and so it's particularly applicable to students, but it's also applicable to people under the age of 26. Now, when it comes to the rules on students, the wording of how it applies is quite important, because it specifically says that most recent permission, other than as a visitor, must be under Tier 4 General or the student route, and that the permission must either be current or have expired less than 2 years before the date of application. That second part, with relating to the 2 years, actually means that it allows for people who are also in the UK as a graduate to rely on on option E for the new entrant salary rate. But there is a slight caveat to that in terms of how long a graduate may be able to rely on the new entrant salary rate. So obviously there's a clear advantage here to employers in that they can pay people on the new entrant salary rate a lower figure, but it's important to note that the new entrant salary rate only applies for a period of 4 years. So essentially, if you do apply, they would issue a certificate of sponsorship for however long it was. If they wanted to offer it for 4 years, they can only offer the new entrant salary rate for that period of 4 years. However, any time spent in the UK as a graduate will account to those 4 years. So for example, if someone isn't able to apply for the skilled worker visa immediately and moves on to the graduate visa, and they spend, say, a year under that graduate visa, if they are now in employment with someone who wants to then sponsor them and to switch over to the skilled worker visa, if they've been here for a year, they could then only rely on the new entrant salary rate for a further 3 years. This is something that we're seeing a lot with employers. They are hiring students, particularly as graduates, because they can get some experience in the labour market and then move them on. But it's just important to note that you will only be able to rely on the new entrant salary rate for 4 years, and then if it gets to that sort of that 4th year, you would then have to move on to a cause with a higher salary rate. Sorry, just missed a slide there. Okay, and yeah, the final option that was most relevant to you is option K. This is specifically for health and care workers. They can be paid a lower salary of £23,200, or the going rate for the health and care occupation code, again, whichever is higher. Now, the going rates for health and care workers are slightly different. They are found within Table 3 of Appendix Skilled Occupations, and they actually base themselves on the latest data from the ONS, or the latest national pay scale data. So essentially the NHS banding pay scales. So again, it's quite specific, but there's a number of different bandings from the NHS, and those are the applied going rates, rather than the particular job having a code and then having a going rate itself. You'd actually have to look at the specific banding for that NHS pay scale. So those are all the kind of like the points-based assistance, but there can be some other requirements related to the skilled worker application. There is a financial requirement, but in consideration of many of you being students and maybe looking to apply immediately out of university, if you've been in the UK for 12 months or more, you will automatically meet the financial requirement. If you've been in the UK for less than 12 months, or if you're applying to enter the UK as a skilled worker, you would need to meet the financial requirement, and you can do so by showing that you have at least £1,270 in your account for 28 days. It is also possible for a for an employer to certify maintenance for you. Essentially, they would do so by confirming that on your certificate of sponsorship. They can then that essentially means that they would cover your expenses for those sort of first 28 days in the UK. Yeah, I mean it's a lot of money. There does tend to be sort of like some documentary evidence related to it, but it's only really applicable, as I said, to people who have been in the UK for less than 12 months or applying to enter. There is also a criminal record certificate requirement. This is only applicable to certain job roles, for instance, social work or things like that. But it's just important to note that, it's worth checking whether a criminal record certificate might be applicable to the particular job code that you're planning to apply under. If you are granted leave as a skilled worker, then, as I mentioned, generally it can be between sort of 3 to 5 years. That's often what employers will sponsor you for, and that is why you can get it granted as either 3 or 5 years, because it's basically how the start and completion date that is put on the certificate of sponsorship. So it's the length of the role that the sponsor is wishing to sponsor you under. There's no access to public funds, and you are only permitted to work in the role that you're being sponsored for, although supplementary employment can be undertaken provided that it's no longer than 20 hours a week. You can undertake voluntary work and you can study, but it's important to note that these kind of roles don't interfere with the role that you are actually permitted to be in the UK. The employers are meant to update the Home Office based on any excessive absences, to update you if you've not been abiding by the hours that you are supposed to undertake as part of that permitted role. So that's why it's key that any sort of supplementary work, voluntary work, studying doesn't interfere with the work that you're permitted, that you would be permitted to undertake in the UK on the basis of a skilled worker visa. As I mentioned at the start, it is a 5-year route to settlement. So, if you are granted leave for 3 years, you would then need to reapply, get a new COS, reapply for a further 2 years to then be able to reach that 5 years, and then apply for indefinite leave to remain. Once you attain indefinite leave to remain, you're no longer under that kind of restriction of having to work for the same employer. That's often one of the reasons why some people might move on to another visa route. Is because they want to move to another employer or don't want to have those restrictions. But yeah, it's just worth noting that once you get to indefinite leave to remain, you don't actually need to work for that same employer. So similarly to how Javier had set out his slides, there's a number of documents that you would be expected to provide. You're looking at a valid passport. There's the e-visa. This is, I'm sure many of you are aware, this is the new system that is coming in as of the 31st of December of this year. Having access to the e-visa, showing that you have legal status in the UK to apply. If the financial requirements if you do need to show financial requirement, there are a number of specified documents you need to provide. Similarly, with regards to the English language requirements, and again, if the occupation code requires a criminal record certificate, then you may need to attain that. Again, if you're in the UK on the basis of a scholarship or sponsorship, then you need to provide consent from that awarding body, that they consent for you to make that application. And if you're looking for dependents to apply as well, there's additional requirements for them and also additional documents that are specified that would need to apply. So that is, that we won't go into dependents on a skilled worker much here, but it's just worth noting that there are additional documents and requirements. So one of the common things that we get asked about in terms of students looking to move on to skilled worker is about the work conditions. Now, just in general, I'm sure many of you are aware of the conditions for working as a student, but I'll just briefly go over them here. Generally, it's only really permitted to work as a student for part-time up to a maximum of 20 hours a week, but that's specifically during term time. It can be full-time work during vacations, and that is inclusive of that period before actually starting the course when you enter the UK. Other Times when work can be permitted is if it's part of the course, if it's a placement as part of the course, or if it's full-time work as a postgraduate doctor or dentist on a recognized foundation program, or as a student union sabbatical officer for up to 2 years, provided that the grant of leave is based on that purpose. Students can't be self-employed or engage in business activity. They can't work as entertainers or professional sports person, and they cannot fill a full-time permanent vacancy unless it's recognized as a foundation program. Now, that last point is particularly important with regards to the time that there may be between having completed the course and your actual leave expiring, and whether essentially you can work within that time in a permanent vacancy. Generally, the answer to that is you can't, and it would need to be a fixed term contract. Now, what we often see with employers is that they will offer students a fixed term contract until the point that they can then apply for the skilled worker visa or the graduate visa. Once you've submitted an application for a graduate visa or a skilled worker visa, you can then work on a permanent contract. And then obviously if you're successful, your contract continues. As a reminder there with regards to when you would actually be able to apply the graduate visas on successful completion, and in most cases for the skilled worker visa it is on completion. Believe I just had a few questions and answers. Yeah, so just a few brief questions that we do often get asked. I mentioned it before about the registry of licensed sponsor holders. So there is a link there for employers that do hold a sponsor license. So you may want to refer to that when you are potentially looking for employers. Again, how do you know if a job is eligible for a skilled worker visa? Again, appendix skilled occupations is generally where you'd need to look. There's also the immigration salary list as well, but appendix skilled occupation has got a majority of the occupation codes. What information or documents are required to establish a genuine vacancy? Again, these include things like job advertisements, interview notes, CVs, job descriptions. Again, this more falls down to the employer when they are assigning or requesting a certificate of sponsorship to then issue it to you. But it's just worth noting the kind of things that would be required to show that there is a genuine vacancy. Is it possible for someone to switch employers from a skilled worker route? Yes, it is, but you would need to make pretty much a whole new application. You would need a new certificate of sponsorship, and you would need to make an application to change your employment, a new skilled worker application. So yes, it is possible, and by doing so you do remain on that route to settlement of 5 years. It doesn't restart the route again, but you would need to make a new application, and you can't start working for that employer until that application has been approved. Okay, so I did mention that we would just briefly go over some other options. Again, I will only very briefly mention these. Javier already mentioned one about family members. If I'd say generally this applies to people who may have a partner that is a British citizen or is settled in the UK. They can essentially apply to become a partner or other family member. The kind of advantage to that route specifically is that it is a route to settlement, which means after 5 years of holding leave under that route, you can apply to settle in the UK. And again, there's no restrictions on the particular work that you can do, comparably to the skilled worker visa. So there's some advantages there, certainly. The Innovator Founder and the Global Talent visas, these are both endorsement-based visas. You essentially need to attain endorsement from external bodies. For an Innovator Founder, it's based on whether you have a viable business plan. And for Global Talent, it's whether you have exceptional talent or exceptional promise in a particular field area, and that endorsing body provides you with an endorsement to then submit an application. So it's essentially a two-stage process for these kind of applications. It's making an application for endorsement and then making an application for a visa. They are, I would say, quite complex. They are quite rarely used because of kind of the higher threshold, but they are quite good visas in the sense that depending on the type of endorsement, you can be granted settlement after holding that visa for 3 years. So they are worthwhile, but again, because of the kind of level of because of the threshold, they can be quite complex, and there's a lot of documents that need to be provided to those endorsing bodies. And I think that concludes everything everything that I had in the skilled worker category. We've put some links there to the gov.uk website about graduates and skilled workers, but also some links to our website about graduates and skilled workers, should you want to read a little bit further about that. I think we may have some time for some questions as well. So I'll hand you back to Nolene.
Yeah, if you've got any questions, you can put them in the Q&A section. That would be great. There was one question in there which I've advised. If your question is related to your student visa, then we do have a visa team at Lancaster University. So you can speak to them about anything to do with your visa. And I've put the link in the chat so that you can see what the visa team. So they anything related to extending your visa or deadlines, vivas, being close to your visa expiry date, that kind of thing. Have a chat with the visa team about that. The other question that's come in is about what counts as business activities or being self-employed on the student visa.
I mean, I would say it's certainly self-employment, acting as a sole trader. If you've got a business that's acting, then I would say you'd have to be careful to ensure that you aren't breaching any conditions as a student. So I think it's difficult without sort of knowing exactly what your potential business activity is, but it would sound like you probably need to be careful if that is something that you're undertaking, that you're engaging in. That's probably as far as I can say. But yeah, if you are acting as a sole trader, or if you have actually opened a company, then it's potentially that you may be breaching conditions of of the student visa because it is specified that you are restricted to doing so.
Okay, great. And just to reiterate to students about working full-time in terms of internships, etc., that is, you can work full-time on your student visa outside of term time. So for postgraduate students, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Callum, postgraduate students, if you're studying a master's, taught master's at university, the summer is considered term time. So you cannot work full-time during the summer as a postgraduate student. As an undergraduate, you can work full-time during the summer outside of term dates. So you can find Lancaster term dates on the website, so that'll help you figure out what dates you can work full-time to.
We see that a lot actually with student inquiries to us is from postgraduate students. Essentially when modules are finished but they are still yet to complete their dissertation, that means that they generally are still in term time. Work conditions remain as those part-time 20 hours max generally. We see that inquiry come up quite a lot for master's students and things like that. So it's I think I agree with you, Nolene.
What are the visa options for self-employment after graduation?
Self-employment's quite difficult. I mean, there's a lot of talk right now around amongst immigration practitioners that there is potential for self-employment under the skilled worker visa, but I'm hesitant to go too far into that because it is quite a complexity. I would almost go as far as to say it's not really applicable. I would be I'd find it unlikely that it's applicable for students as well. The innovator founder is a self-employment category, as is the global talent visa, which is specifically why we put those in there. I mean, the threshold is again quite high because it's not making an application. Well, it is making an application to the Home Office, but it's first of all that first stage of finding endorsement. So the global talent and global promise, the global talent visa trying to show that you have a particular talent or promise in a particular field, there's a number of different endorsing bodies who then have to look at your experience in the particular field. Often it's showing that you have had significant impact in the field in a particular country or multiple countries, and therefore you have sort of a level of talent. Now, there's different requirements for each endorsing body, but that essentially is why it can be quite complex. Similar for the innovator founder, but it's based on having a viable business plan that is then endorsed based on that business plan. So it's a high level, but that is, yeah, essentially I would say the most common of self-employment routes for the UK.
And if you are interested in setting up a business and you're looking at the innovator founder, we do have work in progress on campus. I'll put the link in the chat in a moment. And they do help with that. So we do have a dedicated service that will help you with your business planning and support you in that aspect of self-employment. Another question's come up. So if they've been on a skilled worker visa, switch to the student visa, can they then utilize option E?
I see. If they, so if they've previously been on the skilled worker visa, but then moved and then started studying again, and now looking to go back onto the skilled worker visa.
Yeah,
That's
so
an
they've got
interesting
skilled
one.
worker, student, skilled worker.
Yeah, I don't think that it would preclude them from relying on option E, because option E, the sort of the rule requirements are that you must have held permission in the last sort of permission would have been as a student. So I can't see that there would be any issue for them doing so. I'm just wondering if, yeah, it's a good question actually. I might need to get back to you on that, Nolene, just to confirm. Maybe if you just make a note of who asked that, so that I can confirm that with my colleagues. I don't know, Javier, if you've got any contact. I'm just thinking with regards to the new entrant, if they already had the new entrant rate from the previous old rules, whether that would have any impact on them doing so. I can't see that there would, based on specifically how the rules are worded, but potentially there are. So yeah, Javier, unless you think I'm incorrect there, maybe we'll check with our team, and I'll get back to you on that, Nolan, because it's an interesting query.
Yeah, no, I agree. Especially for the new entrant, but we'll need to double check that.
Yeah, it's an interesting query though. I can't say that I've come across that before. I can't see that the changes to the rules are going to have any impact on that. You know, I'm presuming this person has been was a skilled worker under the previous rules before April this year. Yeah, we'll have to have a check with that, and I'll maybe send our answer to you, Nolan, in an email, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. This is another one that I'm interested in knowing the answer to, because I know that there's no, I can't find a clear answer because this can be interpreted in different ways. But can time spent during the graduate visa, does that fundamentally count towards the 5 years that you would need when switching to the skilled worker route? Or would once you switch to the skilled worker route, would you start your 5 years on that E from scratch?
Yeah. So the 5 years is applicable. So whenever you start a new immigration route, so as a partner or skilled worker, we'll stick with skilled worker here. You begin that route as on the 5-year route to settlement. The graduate visa, as Javier mentioned, is not a route to settlement. So if you are here as a graduate visa, when you switch to a skilled worker visa, you would then begin that 5-year route to settlement. So it doesn't fall under that 5 years. You would essentially be starting a new visa route with a new route to settlement. Now, what have you mentioned before about the graduate route can be used as part of the 10-year route. Essentially, there's options out there for people who have been in the UK for a period of 10 years lawfully to then apply for indefinite leave to remain. So in certain situations, particularly relevant to PhD students, if they've been here, through the entirety of their course studies, they could attain, once they've got a graduate visa, they could attain 10 years of living in the UK, which essentially they could then apply for indefinite leave to remain based on long residence. So whilst the graduate visa won't go towards those 5 years as a skilled worker, it could be used under the 10-year long residence. Yeah, the graduate route is just specifically required to not be a route to settlement.
Okay, great. And if a student secures a graduate visa and then quickly gets sponsorship from a company, say on the skilled worker route, have they already lost 2 years of their 4-year entitlement to the
under the new entrant salary rate?
Yeah, new entrant salary.
Yeah. No, so it's based on how long has actually been spent on that. So the graduate visa doesn't, you know, if you've only just got it and then you're looking to apply for a skilled worker visa, it's possible that you may lose the first sort of 6 months on that. It depends on when the application is submitted, obviously. So if you spent a year as a graduate, then you would lose that year to rely on the new entrant salary rate. But it's not usually done in half. So I would imagine that you may potentially lose a year off that. I'm just trying to think, because the Home Office does operate in half years for some things. So for instance, the immigration health surcharge, that operates in every half year. So whether the new entrant salary rate operates in a half year, like as if you immediately apply and then you lose half a year of your 4 years, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think how it would probably work is that you would potentially lose the full year, so you'd be down to 3. Yeah, I think that's probably how it works. But again, that might have to be one that we double check, because, as I say, if they apply it similarly to the immigration health surcharge, then it could be that they apply it on an every half year basis.
Okay, great. No, that helps, because I think it's not clear guidance on how much of the new entrant salary gets used, whether it was the full 2 years or 6 months, or and obviously that matters to employers as well, because they use that in the sponsorship. Okay, just to clarify, so we've had another one come in where students come on a 4-year student visa for a program including their masters, and they're asking if they switch to a 3-year, so they decide not to do the extra year masters and want to do their masters elsewhere, would they need to reapply for a different student visa for that new masters? And the answer is yes, because if it's at a different institution, you would need that institution to be your sponsor for your visa.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd also encourage that person to have a discussion with the university as well.
Yeah.
Check if you can apply to switch from inside the UK. You know, often there's limits on switching to the UK from one student sponsor to another. So it's just worth, I would say, discussing that with the university that you intend to move to and about sponsorship. But yeah, completely correct there, Nolan. Yeah, you would need to get a new sponsorship.
Brilliant. So by completing a degree or a master's degree in Lancaster, not previously having IELTS scores, do they meet the English language requirement for the graduate visa and skilled worker visa by having the master's and not an IELTS?
Yep. That's yeah. If you can meet the English language requirement for by completing a bachelor's degree or higher from a UK institution. So if you've got a degree from Lancaster University, you'll meet the English language requirement. It is only required for the skilled worker visa, essentially, because a graduate visa requires successful completion of the course in a UK institution. So essentially, you would always meet the English language requirement there. Skilled worker visa, it's completion rather than successful completion. I know that sounds a bit strange, but it essentially means that, you know, you wouldn't specifically have to have successfully completed the course for a skilled worker visa. So you may need an IELTS or other equivalent English language test.
And just to clarify as well, because there are a couple of questions around visa extension. So if a student's extended their student visa and their CAS for their PhD or for other programs, that doesn't impact on their ability to apply for the graduate route.
No, I mean the graduate route is based on them having completed the last sort of permission on their CAS. So I'd say any sort of extensions, you need to ensure that you have been issued with a new CAS. So discussing that with your university, that is the basis of your sponsorship, not the previous sponsorship. So extensions essentially based on the current CAS, and then you would apply on the graduate visa once you have completed the actual course, or successfully completed, I should say.
Yeah, because you'll need to provide proof that you successfully completed the program that you applied to be in the UK for. Because I think that's another one, that if a student applies to do a degree and ends up leaving with a certificate because they've not completed the 3 years, that may impact them being able to apply for the graduate route because they've not successfully completed the program that they came here to study.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's all the questions. Thank you so much. We've put you through your paces today.
Not a problem, not a problem.
Thank you so much for clarifying all of that. The session has been recorded. We will share it with those who've registered. So if you have registered, we will share the link to the recording. And yeah, thank you so much for attending today. Hopefully that's clarified some of your questions. If you want more information, UKISA website is a really good website, Working After Studies. I've just put the link in the chat there. So they will be able to help you as well, kind of talk about the different visa routes. And if you want to set up your own business in Lancaster, then we do have Work in Progress, which is the team that help students setting up businesses. So I'll put that in the chat as well. And that's something that you can, and they support as well the Innovator Founder visa. So that's everything. Thank you, Callum. Thank you, Javier. Have a great day, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you at the next visa update. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Nolene.
Bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.